This video is actually more of a culmination of all the stuff we've done in the past. It's actually going to be an ATM machine, and I know we've done an ATM machine in the past, but this time we're going to bring in all of the stuff that we've learned over the last sets of videos. If you're completely comfortable with everything we've done over the last videos, then you can skip over this and move on to the next one. But if you'd like to see kind of all of the elements that we've learned brought into one program, our ATM machine, then just follow along and maybe you should write it yourself as well. The ATM machine has a bunch of requirements, obviously, and these requirements are that it's going to have a PIN, and you can only use the ATM machine if you have this PIN entered of 1231. If you don't enter the right PIN, it won't let you access the ATM. You can also obviously check your balance. You can see how much money is in your account. You're allowed to deposit money into the ATM, and that will increase your balance, but you must deposit a positive amount. You can't deposit a negative amount. That would cause some issues. You also can withdraw money, which will subtract your balance, and you can only withdraw a multiple of 20 because our ATM machine only has $20 bills. You must have enough money in your account to take out the money, and you can perform multiple transactions. That's the last requirement. So as you are using the ATM machine, you are able to continually access multiple transactions and manipulate your balance. So let's jump right into our program here. And what we have so far is we have our balance variable. Notice that it's an int. So this means that our balance here is actually going to be whole numbers. So we're just going to keep it simple with whole dollar values, no cents or any kind of subdivision there. So right away we can start with our PIN, and we need a variable to hold our PIN. So let's create an int, and it's just going to contain our current PIN. So this makes it easy for you to change it later on. So we're going to make it 1231. Great. So we have our PIN in here, and whenever we're logging in to our ATM, we have to ask the user to enter in this PIN, and we'll verify that they entered the correct one. So let's actually do that. Let's ask them for the PIN. So we're going to ask them for, so we've asked them, and now we need to read it in. So we are going to scanf an integer, but we need another variable. So we're going to create a new variable up here called temp PIN, and this is just going to be the PIN that they have entered. So obviously we need our ampersand as normal, and we have our temp PIN. So now we need to do our little check here. So instead of checking if it's valid, what we're going to do is actually check if it's invalid. And if it is invalid, we're just going to leave the program telling them that it's the wrong PIN. So let's do that. So we're going to see if the PIN doesn't equal temp PIN. Great. So if it isn't equal to the right PIN, we're just going to boot them right out. We're just going to be like invalid PIN and not even give them a new shot. We are going to return right away and just leave the program. So we're going to leave this main by returning out of it earlier than we would normally. So this will just kick right out and end the program. Great. Now we can actually work with our balance at this point. And at this point we need to ask them what they want to do, because remember that they can either check the balance, deposit, or withdraw. So we need to ask them what they want to do. So we're going to go and ask them, what do you want to do? And we're going to give them a few options with some numbers that are going to correspond to those options. So we'll go like this. We'll go, 1 is going to be check your balance. And then we're going to do 2, deposit, and we're going to do 3, withdraw. Great. So we have our options here. Now we need to ask them what option they want to do. So we're going to have a variable here called option, and option is going to have the option they chose. So we'll do a scanf, and we'll read in that value. Great, so we have this option now, and now we can actually react to what they've said. So we need an if statement, and our if statement is going to be if the option is equal to 1, at this point we just need to tell them your balance. So we can say your balance is, and then give them a $sign, and then we can give them our balance variable that holds our balance. Great. Now we have another case, and we're going to make it an else if, so that way it's only going to do one or the other. And then we will say if the option is not equal to 1, but is actually equal to 2. So this means that they are going to deposit. And we'll put a little comment beside it just to say that we know what it is. So we're going to say, then we're going to have check balance. Great. So now we're going to deal with the deposit. And we need to ask them how much money. So we need a variable to say amount that we are going to deposit. If I can spell deposit. And we need to ask them, how much money do you want to deposit? And for now, we're not actually going to do any kind of checking. We're going to add that in later. Let's just get the basic program happening. Then we can add in our checks to make sure that they're depositing a positive amount and we're all good. So let's, for now, just read in our amount here. So we're going to read in amount deposit, adding our ampersand, and we're going to make the deposit. So we need to add it in. So we're going to go balance is equal to balance plus our amount deposit. Or we can do our short form, which is take away the balance and put the plus before, which will add it into balance. So that will just increase the amount of our balance by the amount deposit. Now we just need to do our option equal to 3 for our withdraw. Great. So now we can do our withdraw. And to do the same thing, we're going to actually do pretty much identical to our deposit. We're going to ask for the amount withdraw, how much money do you want to withdraw? So it's pretty much identical to the previous. The only difference in this case, because we're not adding our checks in yet, is that we're going to subtract the amount instead of adding the amount. So we'll do the same type of thing. I should put the bracket. And we're going to go balance be subtracted by the amount withdraw. Great. So now we have those options. But last but not least, we need to check to make sure that they enter a valid option. And so far that we have our if for if it's equal to 1, if it's equal to 2, and if it's equal to 3. But we need to just throw in a catch-all else to make sure that if they entered something else, we can say invalid transaction. So they chose something that they're not supposed to. So if we actually run this program, let's see if we made any mistakes at all. So let's compile it, and we call it atm.c. And let's see it compiled correctly, but let's see if it runs. So we're going to enter our PIN, and let's give it an invalid PIN to start. So let's go 444, and look at that. It kicks us out. It goes to this if statement, and it says if they don't equal, print this out and just leave. And so that's what it did. So let's give it a valid PIN here. So 1231, and we're in. So now we can actually use our menu here and see if we, for example, can check our balance. So let's see what happens when we check our balance. And oh no, our balance is actually something like -1 billion. And so why is that? Why is it just something random? And the reason is because we haven't actually set our balance to anything. And it's using whatever is in memory right now at that location wherever it decided to put balance. So what we need to do is actually initialize balance to 0. So when it creates the variable, it'll set it to 0. So if we run it again and check our balance, we'll get a balance of 0. And if we run it again and deposit, and so we deposited 40, but it didn't do anything, it just left. So we don't actually know if it deposited or if it affected our account. And next time we ran it, it'll wipe out our balance again. and give us a balance of 0. So what we need to do is actually add that last requirement in to allow multiple transactions. And so this means that we actually have to place all of this transaction stuff within a loop that we can do multiple times. So we need to actually put this into a while loop. And so we're going to put a while around all of this transaction. And now that we have this while loop, let's actually indent all of this so that way we know it's part of the while loop. And in this editor, if you select text and hit tab, it actually indents it all. So then what's our condition? Well, we're going to need to store if they want to do another transaction. And so to do this, we're going to need a new variable. And the new variable we'll call another transaction. And it's going to use 1 to represent do another transaction, and 2 to represent no, not another transaction. So we've decided that this variable is going to determine if we want to do another transaction. So what we'll do here in this case is actually go another transaction, and of course we want to check if another transaction is equal to 1. So we need our double equals to check if they are equal. And if they are equal, which in this case they will be because another transaction is equal to 1 when it's initialized, it'll enter our loop. And if we ran it right now, it would work, but the only thing is it would never leave. It would always be equal to 1 because we never affected it. So what we need to do is actually ask them if they want to do another transaction. So we're going to ask, do you want to do another transaction? And of course, they need to know that 1 is equal to, let me put my new line, oops. 1 is equal to yes, and 2 is equal to no. Then we need to take our another transaction and read it in our value to that variable. So with our ampersand in place, we can go to another transaction. So now we'll read in our variable, and it will read into another transaction, and it will repeat as long as another transaction is equal to 1. But what would happen if they entered a number other than 1? Well, it would leave, but we want to try and restrict the user to either entering in 1 or 2. We don't really want them to enter in 3. So what we can actually do is wrap this again in another loop. So we'll set another transaction here equal to 0, an invalid value. And then what we'll say is while another transaction is equal or doesn't equal 1 and another transaction doesn't equal 2, then we want it to perform this code, which as long as another transaction is not valid, which it starts out not being valid at this point, then it will keep repeating this until they either enter in 1 or 2. At that point it will leave, and then this big loop determines if they want to actually do another transaction. So now we have a nested loop, and this will ask them for a valid response because we should do our error checking. And then once they have a valid response, depending on that value, it'll either repeat or it will leave the loop and exit the program. So let's try it out and make sure that we are looping correctly. 1, 2, 3, 1. We will check our deposit. It's 1. Do you want to perform another transaction? Yes, we do. We can deposit. We'll deposit a 40. And we will do another transaction and check that it is indeed 40. And finally, we'll do a withdraw of $20, and we will do another transaction to check that it is indeed now 20. Great. Oh, I should have hit 2. 2 will leave the program. Great. I'm going to add that new line. And now we have our looping. So we're almost done on our fantastic ATM machine. We just need to make sure that our deposit and our withdraw is now validating that they entered right value, so that they didn't enter negative for a deposit, and they have our 2 validation for withdrawing. So first, we'll do the easy check, and we will go like this. If the amount deposit is greater than 0, so it's a valid amount, then we will do the deposit. If it's not a valid amount, otherwise they entered in 0 or negative number, then you can say invalid deposit amount. So now we have that done, and it'll check to make sure that's a valid value. So if we compile and run our program again, let me just clear out the screen here. We enter in our PIN, and we will deposit a negative amount. It says invalid deposit amount, and then it just asks, do you want to do another transaction? Which is perfectly fine. So now we need to just check our withdraw amount, and this can have a few cases. So we want to do a few things. We want to check that if they have enough money. So that means that the amount to withdraw is less than or equal to, less or equal to the amount that they have, which is balance. So if they're withdrawing less money or equal to the amount that they have, they can take it out. And that the amount to withdraw is divisible by 20. So we're going to do our mod 20, and if the remainder of the dividing of 20 is equal to 0, then they can do it. And at that point, yes, we can withdraw the amount. Otherwise, in this case, we should give them 2 separate error messages so they kind of know what's right. And then we can say if the amount withdraw is greater than the balance, at that point we can give them the error message that you don't have enough money, declined, which is always a fun feeling. And then lastly, if we know that they weren't declined because of the amount to withdraw, then we know the other condition failed, and that means that you must enter an amount that is divisible by 20. Great, so now we have a lot of checks in here. And so now our ATM machine hopefully is complete. Let's try it out. And we'll deposit a negative amount, it'll fail. We'll then withdraw something like, let's try 200, doesn't have enough money. So let's put some money in there. So we will deposit $500. Then we will check our balance to make sure that's 500. Then we'll do a withdraw. Let's withdraw, let's try 50, and it will say no, it has to be divisible by 20. But we can for sure withdraw 60, and then we'll check our balance to make sure that it is 440. Great. So it looks like our ATM machine is working perfectly fine. So now we can finish by entering 2 to not do another transaction, and there is our complete ATM machine. Next video, we're going to talk about something called functions, and it'll let us actually clean up this program so that way we don't have all of this stuff in one big loop.